Hey, everybody. You are about to hear a brief retelling of the movie Let's Go to Jail. Enjoy the movie. John Leshitsky has just been released from prison after his third stint. He's been drawn to the dark side since he was a kid. At 8 years old, John stole a van with a huge check for a lottery win. Couldn't cash it, though. Guilty, said the judge. Society needs to be protected from worthless scum like you. The verdict is 7 years in juvie. And that's how the system turned John into a desperate criminal. At 18, he tried to rob mailmen, but completely discharged his gun when he tried to scare them. Sentence was 4 years. 6 months after serving time, the same judge sent John back behind bars for stealing a car. Having found himself free, the guy decided that he must first of all take revenge on the judge, but here's the trouble. The old man had already given his soul to God 3 days ago. With anger, the recidivist shot the phone booth, and then in the bar he came across an article that the son of Judge Biederman opens a memorial. Looks like John found someone to take it out on. While Nelson Biederman was making a speech, the criminal got into his car, where he stole some change, emptied his inhaler, and even puked in his coffee twice. Nelson turns out to be an asshole. He spends the money and yells at the chairman of the foundation, his father. John rides alongside and keeps his eye on his target. An asthmatic frantically tries to use an empty inhaler, then flies into a drugstore in a panic looking for a new one and overturns the shelves. A robber, screams the shopkeeper, a drug addict again, laments his wife, the pharmacist. Finally, the inhaler is found, but the family decides that the scumbag is now threatening them with a gun. John adds pepper by firing his gun. The lady retaliates by firing a shotgun at Nelson. All this chaos was caught on CCTV, and the major was soon arrested. Frustrated with the boss, the board of directors is not going to help Nelson get out of jail. Allegedly, the legal department advised him to take the blame. It's time for Nelson Biederman's trial. John is also in the audience, relying on the good name of his father. Whip decided to dicker with the judge personally. Except that the woman hates people like him, and everything will go according to the letter of the law. His fate will be decided by the jury, full of idiots as Nelson thinks, and it seems he is not far from the truth. Biederman's defense is taken personally by Dwayne, his deputy, and he deliberately speaks complete nonsense, at the same time reminiscent of the movie Jurassic Park. In the end, the jury finds Nelson guilty of attempted robbery, and he is sentenced to 3 to 5 years, which he will serve in Rosemar prison. John imagines how often Biederman will now be beaten and raped in the jails, but for some reason he feels no joy. He wants to personally hurt the rich man, so when 2 cypher cops come to him to buy weed, he pretends he didn't recognize them and goes back to prison of his own free will. That's how he's gonna get back at that Biederman dude. That's his life's work. He bargained with the judge about the sentence. They agreed on 3 to 5, only John really asked to be sent to Rosemar. He even got on the same bus with Nelson and immediately started a conversation with him. John suggests that the major ask for a cell. Nelson is grateful to him for such treatment. The other criminals received him coolly, to say the least. The new batch of prisoners came out to greet the director of the prison, Wardens. He asked to raise his hand, and whoever is not guilty will be released immediately. One was found and immediately got a rifle butt in the stomach. If anyone has any complaints, they should put them on paper and then twist a sheet into a tube and shove it up their ass. Wardens, the rookie counselor. John already knows the local wardens and has bribed one of them to put him in the same cell as Biederman. Nelson advances down the corridor and is frightened by the murderers and thieves yelling at him. He finally reaches his cell, a 2-square-meter room, sits down on the floor, and immediately cries. Johnny tells him to stop crying before the others see him, otherwise he won't live to see the next week. John demands that his cellmate show him his animal grin, but he makes a face like he's constipated. The U.S. spends $54 a day to house one inmate. On a national scale, that's $75 million a day. That's $28 billion a year. It might have been easier to just let them steal car stereos. In the mess hall, John points out the white wealth, chief among them Leonard. He also warns his cellmate that at 12 to 15 he has to get up from the table, but he starts talking, reminiscing about his college life, and at that moment, right in front of him, Leonard stabs a fellow inmate. Warden Shanahan smacked him and asked him who did it. At John's prompting, he immediately pointed to Leonard, but already in the cell he had already deducted it. You don't knock in prison. Another interesting place in prison is the shower room. The big guy Barry appreciated the cute newcomer and started hitting on him, but John told everyone that it was his cock and threatened another prisoner with a shiv. No one else is allowed in that white asshole. Nelson begs Dwayne to get him out for what it's worth, but according to the deputy, it's impossible. Biederman personally has no money. All the funds are in a fund he has no access to because he is no longer chairman. He was fired while he was in jail. John pays a convict to keep punching Nelson in the face, and the dude on the payroll puts crap in his food. In the shower, Barry keeps giving him a nightmare. The big guy's pissed and ready to buy Nelson's ass for any price, and the criminal agrees. Shanahan calls John to clean up the trash and leaves the cell open. Nelson was immediately put a bag over his head and dragged away. He was thrown into the cell where candles and garlands were already burning. Behind him, Barry enters and offers to relax and drink wine, which he burns in the toilet, but immediately presents a knife to the throat of his guest when he lies that Barry does not have a fat ass. The big guy can't stand the lie, and afterwards explains that Nelson is now his property and must please him, but they'll take it slow. First, Nelson gives him a kiss and the men rub their noses together. Fat Barry is a romantic. He won't get on the barnacle right away. He'll woo him. When Nelson was writing a letter to his pen pal, who turned out to be a little kid, he got pissed on by one of the Nazis, which is how he got the message from Leonard. Today he gets out of the SHU. Johnny tells him that the other prisoners are already betting on where Leonard will take him down. Naive Nelson comes up to apologize to Leonard for what happened, but immediately gets a fork in the leg and then another. The only one who has hurt Leonard as badly as Nelson is his father, and he killed his father just as he will kill Nelson. Meanwhile, Barry continues his courtship. John suggests to his cellmate that he hide from Leonard in the sump. To do so, he stands behind Nelson's back and punches the warden in the face. The plan works, except that Nelson goes insane in the box. He has no idea how much time has passed. He started hallucinating. Nelson decided he'd had enough, so he visited the local chemist and asked him to sell him something to finish him off. He offered him a boat cleaner and a syringe. Nelson told a friend about his intentions, and the child read the letter aloud to the class. Suddenly, Leonard visits the cell and pours gasoline on Nelson, complaining that Nelson is not Jewish, so he would be more pleasant. Surprisingly, Nelson fights back well and smashes the killer's face in. Suddenly, he drops a syringe filled with cleaner. Leonard decides it's a Sharev, takes a shot, and immediately reclines. Unexpectedly, the squirmy man dragged the Nazi ringleader out into the hallway, but Johnny was the most surprised. This was clearly not part of his plans. From that day on, everything changed for Nelson in prison. From now on, the White Brotherhood is in favor of him. Biederman is now the boss and can't push anyone around. But there were still unresolved matters of the heart. Barry has grown fond of Nelson in recent months, and he is hurt that they share his feelings. The big guy almost strangled Nelson in the bathroom. Our hero was ashamed that he broke Barry's heart. Then the Nazis burst into the toilet to protect their boss. But he asked them not to touch the lovesick ambo. John mistakenly got into the punishment cell, and when he got out he saw that Biederman was building the whole prison and even put on a musical with the convicts. John is furious about the way things are going, and it is him that Nelson thanks for the fact that his cellmate has prepared him for life in prison. The revenge plan has gone to hell, and tomorrow is Biederman's parole hearing. Preparing for the big day, Nelson is helped by his big black friend. John walks into the cell and gives Nelson a parting gift: a can of soda, while wishing him good luck at his hearing. Biederman is wary. The can was already open for some reason. However, the cellmate pretends to take offense at his friend's suspicion, as they have been through so much together, and at the same time he takes a sip. Nelson apologized and drained the entire can. A second later he fell unconscious, and John vomited it into the toilet. Together with an accomplice, he carried Nelson's body somewhere. The next day, the commissioners asked Biederman if he is ready to return to society. Of course he is, not realizing that he has white power written on his forehead. Naturally, he was denied release. Nelson immediately lashes out at his cellmate's goat. During the fight, he finally confessed that it was all about his father, the judge. Warden Shanahan is offended that the inmates are fighting without him, so he schedules a brawl and suggests that the wankers fight in the yard on Friday. It will be a fight to the death. The loser will die, and the winner will be brought in by Shanahan himself. To keep the local gladiators from fooling around, a minder has been left with them. All the prisoners do more than place bets, such as whether a skull will be fractured or an ear will be bitten off. The Biederman has a visitor, it's Barry. The board decides he's reformed, and it's all thanks to Nelson, but he can't be happy without his fish. He wants him out. Nelson has an idea in his head. He calls Dwayne and tells him that if he stays in prison, he will turn over control of the foundation to his son, and according to the bylaws, he will run everything until Nelson is released. He adopted a man in prison. The principal is also aware of the impending fight to the death and bets $50 on the rookie. So it's Friday. The fighters enter the arena to the screams of the prisoners. The rules are simple. The first one to die loses. Nelson took out a screwdriver, but his opponent was even better prepared. One shiv flew into a gawker, the other broke on Nelson's makeshift body armor. But they left their main weapon for last, syringes filled with colorful chemicals. Nelson landed a fatal blow, but was also stabbed in the back. The draw was summarized by Shanahan and dispersed the spectators. Biederman was buried. His only heirs turned out to be his adopted son. He received $8 million. Leaving the cemetery, Barry did not leave. He got a shovel and dug up his adopted dad by evening. Earlier, Nelson had ordered a special compound from a chemist that would send him into a coma, and Barry bribed the coroner. Nelson was about to leave, but Barry reminded him of his agreement to save John. The former enemies stayed even. A year passed. Barry and Nelson opened a winery called Duckling. One critic didn't like their wine, but he was pressed by John and a couple other ex-cons who worked here, and the man promised to give it a 100 out of 100. Although this nasty ammonia-flavored pooch is not liked by anyone, not even the winemakers themselves.